Because it's 7:30, you're listening to Radio Literature on WORT 89.9 FM out of Madison, Wisconsin. I'm your host for this evening, Jason Compton. Melvin Hinton is away this week. But before he went away, Melvin asked me to bring on a full slate of theater guests, and I've done my best to do that this week, oriented around the theme of specifically of the development and premiere of new theatrical works in Wisconsin. I'll introduce you to all of our guests shortly, but I first want to bring on Michael Cotey, who is the festival producer of World Premiere Wisconsin, which is a months-long festival taking place throughout the state focused on the development and premiere performances of just what it sounds like, world premieres in Wisconsin. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for those who aren't familiar or have not yet had a chance, we're roughly halfway through the festival season. Can you give just a brief overview of the types of works, the range of theater companies that are all encompassed under the World Premiere Wisconsin banner?
Sure, absolutely. Well, World Premiere Wisconsin is in its inaugural year. We launched March 1st, which was officially declared World Premiere Wisconsin Day by Governor Evers. It's the brainchild of Jen Uphoff-Gray, who is the artistic director of Forward Theater Company, and she came up with this idea pre-pandemic as a way of accomplishing a number of goals. One, how do we build relationships in the state among theater makers, among different levels of theater making, from your large professional theaters to academic and community groups? And two, how do you foster and encourage the creation of new work in the state? Creating new work is a different beast altogether than doing extant plays, and it can be risky to do. So how can you create an initiative that would encourage people to take the plunge and bring new work to the state? And so this festival is kind of amazing, and we really have to give Jen credit for it, but it's a several month-long festival ranging across three major regions of Milwaukee, Madison, Door County, but throughout the state, nearly 47 organizations involved presently. And you have everything from full productions at a number of festival theaters like Forward Theater Company, like Milwaukee Rep, Northern Sky in Door County, to readings and workshops in more than 20 communities. So what's been really exciting is that this is the first of its kind. I mean, we have done quite a bit of Googling to try to make sure that our claim here is correct, but there has never been a statewide theater festival like this before. There have been theater festivals that are state in name, but they usually take place in one geographic location over maybe a weekend or a course of maybe 2 weekends, 3 weeks. So this is ambitious in both its scale, its scope, its geography, the number of levels of theater involved, and just frankly, the number of productions. There's almost 300 performances, more than 300 performances over the course of the festival months. Mm-hmm. So you asked, like, what's playing this festival? There's a little bit of something for everybody. I think that's the great thing about this. It shows the real breadth of what is made here in theater in Wisconsin.
Okay, and I want to bring on at this time Danielle Dresden, who's the co-producing artistic director of TNW Ensemble Theater. Literally, New Works is in the name, or used to be in the name. The company was once known as Tappet New Works. According to Danielle's bio, she herself has produced 39 new plays over the existence of the theater. And to invoke an old joke, Danielle, that goes, is wrestling fixed? Well, I didn't know it was broke. As somebody who's been very intimately involved in the development and performance of new works for a number of years, what, if anything, was missing from your perspective that was hindering, limiting, otherwise could have been improved in the development of new works in Wisconsin?
I think one of the things that was missing, and there are certainly many things that are missing, but one of the things that stands out is something that's being addressed by World Premiere Wisconsin, and that is institutional involvement by theaters, and I would say the institutional theaters in the state. So established theaters such as Forward Theater, such as the Milwaukee Rep, are volubly and publicly taking a stand saying we support new work. And That hadn't happened before. So by creating this critical mass, I hope, of theaters of all different kinds, from community theater in Fond du Lac to the what is the one in Door County?
Peninsula Players, or
no, to the that's one of the, Michael, you could answer this, one of the major leading theaters. What is, anyway, to major.
Northern Sky?
Yes, Northern Sky, to institutional theaters, to companies like mine, which is, we like to say we've been under the radar since 1985. And we are a professional company. We pay people all the time, and always have. We are not an equity company. I'm in the process of signing an equity contract for people now. We've done that over time. In any case, our roots really go back to, I would say, an experimental theater perspective. The community theater in Fond du Lac that was doing a new play, that play is not in any way experimental. So it's all different kinds. And I think that's this festival. One of the many things I appreciate it is the way it's focusing public attention on new work, and in a very inclusive way. And I see how the festival has gone out of its way also to reach Wisconsin playwrights, and which I am one of those. Mm-hmm. And it's not only just reaching out to the usual suspects, whoever they might be, but encouraging all people who get emails to think of other playwrights that wouldn't have been contacted, and just expanding the reach and being as inclusive as possible. I think that's terrific.
Yeah. And, original, new works certainly do have a very deep and rich tradition here in Madison. It's through original new works that I've met a number of people that I know in the theater community, which is my cue to bring on Jake Penner, as Jake and I met 12 years ago doing an original work. Jake is currently the outgoing artistic associate at American Players Theater. Wrap your head around being current and outgoing. And APT, which, is historically known for putting on works whose median age is in the hundreds of years, it just put on a stage reading of The Barber and the Unnamed Prince by Gavin Lawrence as part of World Premiere Wisconsin. So the question for Jake is, what does it mean for a theater organization that is fundamentally, or has historically been fundamentally built around the classics, to engage not just with a new canon, which those who pay attention to APT know that it's been pivoting to, of more contemporary plays, but to actually participate in the production of brand new work? What are APT's advantages and specific sort of spin and angles on the development of brand new work?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me, Jason. I know it feels like a little bit of a contradiction of terms to have a classical theater company like APT, like you said, is part of its mission has Shakespeare at the center, quote unquote. The Barber and the Unnamed Prince was a new script in development by one of our core company actors named Gavin Lawrence, and it was actually a part of a 3-part Winter Words series this season that included an updated adaptation of Agamemnon and then another of Uncle Vanya, both by other core company members, David Daniel and Nate Berger, respectively. And it's a great question. New works has sort of come into the picture recently in the last few years at American Players Theater, and I think that it's we're coming at it from a couple of different angles. It is a multi-pronged approach, the first of which being that all of the artists who are either actors or directors or writers or a combination therein are not only interested in doing classical plays, that they've made it the bedrock of their career in most cases, certainly as far as the core company goes. But they've always been interested, and this is really the core of why I think they're as good as they are, and they've had as much of a reputation in Wisconsin as they do, is that they are interested in taking classical universal themes and classical text and making it as current as it could possibly feel coming out of the mouth of somebody in the Midwest in 2023 in the summer outdoors amongst the bugs and the wildlife. They have a particular gift of making things feel immediate and like they are relevant to our lives, so that when you're sitting there watching a piece of 400-year-old text, outdoors, it all of a sudden it doesn't feel like 400-year-old text. It feels completely relevant to the moment that you're living in, and that has always been the goal in any room that I've been in at APT, and I've been lucky enough to be in the room in several different capacities over the years. I think that in addition to just that sort of general idea, I think that we started to take a real interest in developing new plays, because somewhere along the lines, maybe a few years or so ago, the conversation about what it meant to be a classic came into the picture in a big way at that institution. And I think even looking at that term classic, it became an exercise in, well, what even defines that, and who gets to define that, and how does a piece of text take go on a journey from being first produced hundreds of years ago to being considered to be a canonical work in our culture today, and what did they have to navigate in order to earn that designation? And in so doing, were they able to make that journey in an easier way than maybe something from a playwright from perhaps a historically underrepresented perspective would have been able to? And so right around that time, we started to consider working on developing new scripts, and even went so far as to commission one as part of a new initiative that launched last year called New Voices, Creating the Classics of Tomorrow, where we solicited open submissions from about 125 playwrights, and myself and a couple of core members of the team went through all of them as a collective and scored them all along a set of criteria, and ultimately chose a writer named Reggie Jackson, who's out of Seattle, who is in the process actually with us right now of developing a new script about Edmonia Wildfire Lewis, who is a 19th century sculptor of mixed African American and Native American heritage. She's a fascinating historical character. She's starting to come back into the conversation now. I think Google had one of their Google Doodles last year about her. And one of the most fascinating things about her, at least from my perspective, is that she has a great story that also seems to change depending on which room she happened to be in and which audience she was addressing at the time, which felt like really fertile ground for a theatrical character. So look for more on her in the next couple of years out at APT.
Okay. So in summary, it sounds like APT has suddenly become all about original work, which I think we'll definitely come back to. I know I'm exaggerating there, but very interesting. And last in the studio, but not least, another collaborator in a number of original works, Benjamin Barlow, is also in studio with us. Ben is on the board of both Madison Theater Guild and Strollers Theater, which are both participating in World Premiere Wisconsin and are among the resident companies at the Bartell Theater. My question for Ben is, we're seeing that both MTG and Strollers produced, MTG has closed its production of Bad in Bed, and Strollers is about to premiere Hush the Waves. These are both part of World Premiere Wisconsin, both created by local Madison playwrights. What has it meant for these two theater companies, which historically do not make season-by-season investments in doing original works, to put the additional time and energy into developing a play with a local playwright for your audiences? Yeah,
I'm a little more unfamiliar with MTG's past history with new works, but from Strollers, who I've been around with for the last several years, the last new work that we did was Infamous Mothers in 2018 by Sagacious T. Livingston on her book, Infamous Mothers, and it was a wild success. The last previous new work that we did was Arborophilia in 2017, and that's the last new work that we've done in a decade. So it's a risk for a community theater to put on new work because audiences in a community theater setting are maybe a little less interested. And I think it was said earlier about critical mass to get people to see new work is really an influence on whether or not community theater can succeed in this type of environment. And I think having World Premiere Wisconsin, having the logo, having the organization around it, reduces that risk for somebody like Strollers or MTG or another community theater to participate. And then our next show is Hush the Waves, Sam D. White, a very personal story for him. And it's on its way to being performed here in the next couple weeks.
Excellent. And Danielle, I wanted to ask you about the particular World Premiere Wisconsin work that you have in progress, which, unlike some of TNW Ensemble's works, is not a full cast, full length, but it is a production performed by a local, Kiki Moritsugu, A Woman Is. Can you tell us a little bit about how that project came to be, how it came to be part of what you're doing with TNW, and then ultimately, by extension, part of World Premiere Wisconsin?
Sure. It came about because we were doing a different production celebrating the works of Ruth Draper, who's a wonderful writer and performer from the earlier part of the last century. She's the most famous performance artist you never heard of. She was a performance artist before there was such a thing. And her work is amazing. And so we were doing this production, and Kiki Moritsugu, who's an actor, she's a triple threat performer. So she's an actor and a dancer and a singer. And she was sitting backstage in her mother's clothes telling stories about her mother all the time. And Donna Peckett, who is my partner and the other co-producing artistic director of TNW, said, we should do a one-woman show of Kiki talking about her mother. Because it's quite a story, and it's a complicated story. So, as the house playwright for TNW, I interviewed Kiki for several months, and wrote a script, and we rehearsed it, and we were going to open it in March, then April, then May of 2020, and then we went on to do a couple snippets of it in performances on a balcony. To keep us all sane in the intervening years. And in between, we spent a lot of time working on it because I'm a playwright, so I wrote Kiki's life story, which is interesting because I'm certainly not a dancer or a singer and actor that you have to ask, right? And
if you have to ask, you can't afford it, or that's a different joke.
Not necessarily.
Oh, well, let's talk after the
Yeah, okay. And so, in working on it over and over during the pandemic by Zoom for a lot of rehearsals, it was actually a delicious time. It's a kind of time that a playwright who does new works, or a company that does new works all the time, it never gets. And it doesn't matter what kind of company you do or what kind of work you're doing. You never have enough time. But for a couple of years, all we had was time, and we then did a first production of the play that was of the performance. It was in 2 acts, and it was very successful. So then we decided we would try to take it to give it a life and move on with it. And it's going to the Toronto Fringe in whenever, I think that's July. But to be suitable for that, it has to be 1 act instead of 2, and a whole lot shorter. I mean, roughly 30% shorter. So then I revisited with Kiki the script again, and we cut it and changed it immensely. So it is a different, shorter, faster version, and is thus, and I cleared this with all the officials of World Premiere Wisconsin, it still can qualify as a premiere.
That's good to know. Michael, I want to bring you back in on this, and I think you spoke already in the manner of somebody who understands in part what this project will be measured on, and you emphasized 300 performances and things like that. But once this festival period ends, what are the things that we, the theater-going audience of Wisconsin, those of us who are involved in its creation, what do you think we'll be able to look at as the ongoing effects once that window closes? What are the goals? What are the tangible things we're going to take away? Is it about, for example, there used to be a theater here in Madison on Williamson Street where odds were that when you walked by, there was going to be a brand new play going on about 40 weeks out of the year. Is the goal to get one of those spun up in each of the markets that participated, in every metro market in Wisconsin? What are those things beyond those stats that you've got right now for this many theater companies and this many productions and this many performances that we think might ripple through and propel the creation of new works in Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, I think the indication of this was a kickoff event back in February. We were at 10 Chimneys, and I've been at a number of these kind of things before, where we've had there's the same cast of people who show up at these big events for the theater community, and it's the same people you see all the time. And for the first time, I was in a room with 130 theater makers that were truly from the state of Wisconsin, that were from every level of making theater, that were from multiple markets. And it really clicked for a number of us at this event. What we're building here is, yes, an appetite for work, but also a real sense that our theater ecosystem, from the top of the food chain to the bottom of the food chain, really relies on each other in order to thrive and make an impact in American theater. So I think one of the intrinsic things that will come out of this festival is a greater sense of how we can work together. We've spent 3 years feeling kind of apart and kind of alone in all of this, not really gathering. And what we might have inadvertently created along with this festival is a new way of collaborating, not just on our individual markets, not just with the theaters that we know, but how can we uplift and amplify things that are just a real, relatively speaking, short drive away from where we call home. And I think what we're doing here can become a bellwether of ways of making theater together and thinking about theater community for other markets and other states who are especially looking at, in this time of rebuilding and recovery post-COVID, how do we get audiences back? And how do we support each other? Really putting action behind, I think, sometimes a lot of lip service we give about us being a community, et cetera. But how do we really do that? And then also, one of the things that I came on with this project, it wasn't necessarily, I would say, a direct focus of it from leadership, though they're in full support of the idea of supporting local playwrights. So I would say, like, among the festival theaters, which are equity houses, I would say half of them are doing shows by Wisconsin-based playwrights. And the bulk of the plays being done by the participating theaters, your sort of community fringe academic groups, are doing almost wholly local playwrights. I think there is a sense of, like, how do we support our local brew? How do we root for the home team here? And I think Danielle, this is actually something you said in our first conversation together. There is a lot of rallying behind local talent when you talk about actors, directors, designers, but playwrights kind of get left out of that conversation sometimes. And when I came onto the project, I really wanted to make sure that we use this opportunity as a vehicle to support and uplift our local playwrights. So one of the things that I'm excited about, and I just emailed everybody who is going to participate in it, but feel okay sort of announcing it. We are hosting a Wisconsin dramatist retreat at 10 Chimneys in May, where we're gathering 35 or so Wisconsin-based playwrights for a 2-day excursion at 10 Chimneys, where we're involving the Dramatists Guild Institute, playwright Sam Hunter, who is the writer of The Whale and a lot of other great plays, is going to join us as a visiting dramatist. And really, it's about how do we take this group of playwrights that are everywhere from early to mid to prolific careers as playwrights in Wisconsin. How do we get them to come to 10 Chimneys and leave feeling that they've got a community, that they feel empowered, and that they feel like there's a place for them in Wisconsin theater?
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. I want to make sure that I get a question in for Ben here. Ben, you and I have a collaborator that we've worked with who's somebody who would say he would always try to be cast in original works because if that work goes national, if that gets published, your name is forever on that original cast list. Now, you, from this perspective, as somebody on the production side, is there something that for you provides that extra thrill, that extra potential of, I'm not just buying paint for any set, I'm buying paint for an original play? Does that give you any extra boost?
To an extent, I'm sure, yes. I'm more into the theater for the sake of doing theater, regardless of the content, and the participation and the social aspect is more what I'm interested in. But the fact that your name can be memorialized, or your design, or your takes, your decisions on stage can be memorialized in an original work is kind of a thrill. I think that's the added little benefit, the cherry on top to a particularly good performance, if it's something right up your alley.
Okay. And Michael gave us an excellent look ahead at what'll be coming down the road with World Premiere Wisconsin. I'd like to ask our other guests if you could share just a little bit about where you see, let's say, your contributions to original theater premiere works in Wisconsin over, let's call it the next 24 months, starting with Danielle.
Oh, is that all? Let's see. One of the things that we used to do pre-pandemic is that my company would host a thing that we called Women Playwrights Speak Out. And it was every January, and we would invite women playwrights to read. It was 10 minutes, either a 10-minute play or 10 minutes of a longer play. And it was not curated. It was just everybody that we had time for. And the only thing is the playwrights had to bring their own cast and rehearse them. And we did it in our studio theater, and it was a very fun event. It went by the wayside in the pandemic. I'd like to bring that back. And I am an ambassador for the Dramatists Guild. I don't know exactly what that means, but one of the things that we want to do is do some in-person, because we can do that now, readings from Wisconsin playwrights. And I think that within the next 24 months, yes, that will happen.
Excellent. And Jake, you now stride the continent. We know that you will be back in town for Anton Shorts at APT, which is a new-ish and old-ish work. Are there other things that you see for yourself and for APT over the next 24 months in that new works category?
Not officially for myself, although I hope I can be involved at some point in the future. We're going to continue to do an internal workshop of Wildfire. That's the new play about Ammonia Lewis by Reggie Jackson. We will do that mid-season, this season coming up. His director, Rosa Joshi, will also be one of the directors in the repertory season, and we'll all sort of be there to convene and do some internal workshopping of that piece, with eyes on maybe doing a public reading around this time next year. And then I would say that any of the three scripts that we did public readings for as part of Winter Words are on the table for future production at some point. I know we had a lot of excitement about all three. As the resident Chekhov nerd of the season, I sure hope that Nate Berger's Uncle Vanya gets some consideration from leadership over there. But I think we'd be happy with any of the three going.
Excellent. And Ben, 20 seconds.
20 seconds?
Can you share in 15 seconds what you might be doing for original works of the next 24 months?
Oh, Sam D. White's Hush the Waves. That's a very personal story for him, an ode to nurses and an ode to young mothers in their decisions to go in and out of pregnancy and birth and all that stuff, bringing life into the world.
Okay, and that'll be April 21st through May 6th at the Bartell Theater. A Woman Is will be May 13th and 14th at Edgewood College's Ballweg Theater. Remains for me to thank Michael Cotey, Jake Penner, Ben Barlow, and Danielle Dresden, along with our engineer, Summer Koff. I'll be with you again next week. Thank you all.